guys.
Good afternoon, everyone. We hear a little echoing, so if your sites are not muted, please do so. I'm going to do a roll call of this, and then I'm going to turn it over to our presenter, Bernie.
Yeah.
And I don't think I have to do a bio on him or anything. I think everyone knows you.
Did you do the one I sent you?
No, I didn't.
You can cut off the 4th and the 5th page.
Okay, is Aberdeen on?
Yep, we are straggling in. Thanks, Janet.
You bet. Brookings.
Brookings is here.
Awesome. Eglay, are you on?
I'm here.
Good, I'm proud of myself. I pronounced your name right, I think.
Yeah.
Stephen Chamberlain, are you there?
Hello, Chamberlain's here, Janet.
Great. Rapid City?
Yes, we are here.
Jessica?
Jessica, you there? Mitchell?
We'll come back. Sioux Falls, DHS, are you on?
Yeah, Sioux Falls is here.
Okay. Sioux Falls Rehab Center?
You may not. I don't know.
Okay, we can come back. Spearfish?
No, Egley was already.
Oh, well, I got both sites for her then. Never mind. Carmen?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, thanks, Carmen. Watertown?
Watertown's here.
Watertown?
We
Okay.
can barely hear you, Watertown, so.
Yankton?
Oh, Yankton's here.
We're fighting. Yep.
You're fighting?
Well, I was unmuting it and then she clicked, so.
We were both doing the mute at the
Yep.
same time.
You girls get along.
Yep.
Jessica, are you on?
Here.
Okay, good. Well, it looks like we're all on, so I'm going to turn it over to Bernie. And this
North
is
Dakota, do you want to check, see if they're on?
Oh, I forgot about Luann. Luann, are you on?
Yes, we are. Hello.
Awesome.
So don't say anything bad about North Dakota, guys, okay?
There she is.
We can hear.
We'll have to cut out the North Dakota jokes.
And like I said, this is being recorded, and we'll get it out on the website shortly afterwards. Hopefully, Steve always works hard on getting those up. So I'm going to turn it over to Bernie.
Okay, I'm just going to go down my list. A couple things, reminder. Make sure that your site is muted unless you have a question. And some of your sites, remember, you have 2 microphones. And if you have one still behind the TV, we get echoing onto there. There's a sign-up sheet. Please do the sign-up sheet. And you need to scan them, send them to Janet, or put them in the mail or the other. So kind of going through some policy changes, some sections of the counselor manual. Going to be dealing with, let me bring up the PowerPoint here, get that started, and let me get this down and get PowerPoint going. Hold on here, I'll get it. Okay, let me knock this out. Slideshow. Okay. Anyway, it's going to be dealing with the overview of the maintenance requirements. We made some changes to our travel vehicle policy. And matter of fact, Steve Stewart and I were talking about van vehicle modifications, that we're also making some additional changes on vehicle modifications portion of the counselor manual, and we'll be sending it out. And the post-secondary allowable rates, we made some changes onto there and calculated the post-secondary services. And this all kind of started with some changes to the maintenance requirements. Of course, that all led into one thing after another, which tied into, of course, post-secondary, because there's times we're funding some of those costs. Those are considered maintenance costs. So, again, this will be downloaded on the department's website, where we have what we call the intranet, where we put all our training folders. for the DRS and SBVI staff, we do have a different site where we have all our trainings recorded for providers, and so this is not the same site into there. So, I sent the PowerPoint out and the handouts. I'm not going to read word for word what the maintenance requirements are, but it's basically additional expenses occurred because of the services that VR is providing, which is typically the food, shelter, and clothing type of expenses. Sometimes the daycare would fit in there too. And so don't confuse this with when we do make payments to clients. I see that we make payments to clients sometimes for reimbursing them for the self-employment expenses they had. And, they think, okay, we're paying a client, that's maintenance. No, that's self-employment services onto there. So the maintenance, when we call it specifically, is for the food, shelter, living kind of expenses, is additional cost occurred into there. So, and also a couple years back, you may have seen where we added some services on providers' travel time, because what happened is it was getting coded into maintenance for the client maintenance, and it really was job placement, or it was job coaching, or it was the assistive technology was another one, interpreter ones. People were picking travel costs for those services, which was being coded on our system as a client maintenance instead of the service. So that got changed a few years ago. We added all those additional services onto there. So the regulations, and I think this is about the only place in the regulations that give examples. And this came out a few years ago. It never changed in the last couple of sets, but they give 3 examples of maintenance. And they're fairly good examples. And one is it's a cost of uniform or clothing that's required for the job placement or job seeking. We do that at times. It is a cost of short-term shelter because the individuals participating in assessment activities or vocational training, which is post-secondary, and a site that's not within commuting distance of the individual's home. And the third one is one-time costs such as security deposits, utilities, charges like that for when a person does move because of a job. We don't want to be doing this just because the person wants to move from Pierre to Watertown or to Sioux Falls. We do get those requests sometimes that there's no job related, they just want to move. And that's not our responsibility. From the counselor manual, I highlighted 3 things into there. It does require a financial needs test unless it's needed for assessment services. So if you are sending someone down for a psychological evaluation, if they have to travel, we can pay for that mileage. And if they had to stay overnight, even, we could pay for those costs into there. Must be related to obtaining the employment goal. And monthly maintenance procedures, I wrote that in, wait for Jan to get done answering her phone, which will put her in a spot and embarrass her. What's that? She can't find her phone. So anyway, the monthly maintenance is my understanding when you're paying some people while they're going to college, they have that maintenance, and there's something set up with fiscal that they're doing that monthly maintenance payment happening for that rent and stuff. So, but one thing I would point out, it's something like Lay's potato chips. Sometimes you just can't do one for some things. I see cases sometimes you'll be doing the medications, or the person just can't, they're going to be homeless, and it's not a second living expense. And you got to wonder, okay, how are they going to fund this month 2 and month 3? Because you just funded it the first month. It's going to be expected all the following months. So, I mean, I know there's hardships out there, and it's hard to say no to people, but it's sometimes, like I said, it's like the Lay's potato chips. How do you end with just one? And it's tough to do that because the next month comes around and they don't have the job yet, or they still got the living expenses. So how are you going to deal with that? So you almost need to, and if there are those extreme situations, to be discussing with your supervisor, and even at my level or at Rhonda Williams' level before you get into that, because those typically end up with a mess and stuff. So When not to provide maintenance, when the client is not actively working on his or her employment plan, the maintenance service is not additional expense incurred. Other resources are available, or the client does not meet financial need unless it's assessment. And really the best practice is when the person is actively in their training, or there's a history of being cooperative, or the person is working. You know, if you pay their rent with them in a job placement stage and, you know, I'm going to get a job next month and it doesn't happen, it usually comes with a problem afterwards on that. One other thing I want to point out is VR means vocational rehabilitation and not vehicle repair. You get extra points if you can guess what that car is on the picture there. That was my first vehicle. It wasn't quite that good a condition. But VR is not responsible for the typical repairs. It's not responsible for oil changes. It's really not responsible for tires, just because the tires look like they're getting a little worn out before winter. You know, we really need to look, how does this fit into the person's rehabilitation? Why is that transportation needed? Because I see sometimes where we're doing tire repairs and the person's living in a dorm. They're not traveling. So why are we doing oil changes? Why are we doing tire repairs? All those things onto there. Now, it's another thing when the person is traveling from Rapid City to Spearfish Daily. They just started a job. I can understand some situations like that. But just typical maintenance stuff is probably not a good choice to get involved with. We put some additional language in the counselor manual and documentation. We've always said in the past, need driver's license and proof of insurance. And we used to say vehicle registration. We crossed that out. The other two are satisfactory. But, this is when we're doing gas, when we're doing vehicle repairs, any of the things paid for transportation, we should be getting the proof of driver's license and proof of insurance. You also should have, how is the mileage calculated? It shouldn't be just a blanket $100 a month. I know sometimes we're doing it to gas stations, sometimes we're doing it as a maintenance to the individual. It can be done either way in there. Sometimes you have a hard time getting gas stations to approve our vouchers. But either way, you need to have some documentation how you calculated it. Justification of the need for transportation assistance should also be in there. And I do know some offices set up some bus passive situations they use when people first start, which is a pretty good way of doing things. That your person applied, you're doing some eligibility, you're going to do some guidance and counseling, meet with that person, and they have some bus passes on file. They pull one out and then they do an authorization to replenish that supply. If your office doesn't have that, you may want to talk to, I know Sioux Falls has it. I'm not sure if Rapid City does or not. They might, but it worked pretty good for some situations. Other conditions, things, we don't purchase vehicles or we don't make vehicle payments. We don't maintain the operation of vehicles, I mentioned before. And we need to repair and fix only when it's necessary to get the vehicle running. I've seen some cases in the past that because a person didn't have full coverage, that we're repairing the dent in a car. That dent in the car does not impact that car's ability to make it to work and back. So that's the person's responsibility. I very rarely would I ever see any approval justification for auto body repair. So. Other considerations you need to take into effect is, can the person use public transportation? I know they'll say that, well, I like my independence and my choice is blah, blah, blah. But, just because their choice doesn't mean it's our taxpayers' responsibility out there. So if there is other public transportation, other means of transportation, we need to be looking at that. We also need to look at why pay for a Cadillac when a Chevy will do, and I'm using that in terms of not buying a car. But is there more cost affordable means of transportation here for people? Another thing I put in there, don't get in a situation where a person buys a car, and I've seen this a couple times, they buy a car, and then they'll go to auto mechanic, and the auto mechanic will give them a list of everything they should have done on that car. And so they just bought the car, and they're handing us a bill or an estimate for $2,000 to start doing repairs. Now, just because they've got a list doesn't mean everything on there, we even should consider into there. First of all, I don't know why they bought a car that needs all this repair. That's kind of a bad decision out there. Then we're going back to that same question before, is there other means of public transportation? And if there is, then that ends the discussion that that's what they should be doing. And so I've seen a couple situations like that where they get into a car and they give us an estimate of all things. Or you got to be careful also when a person's telling you that the car is having problems and you send them down to an auto shop to get an estimate. Again, I've seen the estimates come back with anything and everything on there, and not everything is necessarily appropriate. So there is times where the repair may be more than the cost of the book value of the car. It doesn't mean that we can't do repair. I do. It probably where you need to discuss it with the supervisor first. You know, there's a lot of $500 cars driving around. And I don't want to get into where we're doing $2,000 motor repairs or oil, transmission changes. But if it needs a $60, $70 part or some tires or brakes, and that's really needed and necessary because they have a distance to travel for work or that training, that is a possibility into there. As with any service, is it needed? Is it necessary? And of course, is it cost appropriate? Before I get into post-secondary, is there any questions you guys may have? Okay, well, I'm going to go forward then. I listed all the, when you're funding or working with someone going to post-secondary, it is probably the most complicated part of VR. And it's because there's a number of program guides that you do have to consider in dealing with post-secondary. Of course, there is the financial needs that before we fund any post-secondary, the person has to meet their financial need requirement out there. We have a program guide 2002-05 dealing with tuition and fee, and of course that gets into discussion of those scholarship issues. We've seen some of these colleges that say they're scholarships, but they're really tuition reductions. And how come I got financial need written twice? 2015-05. Oh, I'm sorry. The first one, 0104, is poverty guideline. That changes that amount every year, and Mitchell updates that into the VR faces. And there's also, you got a spreadsheet out there we do too. People take it on the road. Maybe. There used to be, but anyway, there is the form in the VR faces, and those calculations from that poverty guideline are put right into that form. If anyone's using that Excel spreadsheet when they travel, let Mitchell know. He can update that if it's not already. So, there is the financial needs worksheet and instructions, 314, and also the program guide to post-secondary allowable rates, which I just updated and sent out recently. That had a number of changes in there. And there is a 336 student financial aid report that we send to the colleges, and they tell us how much the cost for tuition is going to be, how much the Pell Grant's going to be. It's also released. And I just made some changes onto that and put it out there for you guys. So I'll talk about that in a minute. And one of the things I want to point out is but what if? And there's a lot of what ifs in this situation. And we try to address as many of those as possible. Hopefully, this guidance will provide consistency between offices. But some of these things, you've got some real questions on these unique situations, to work through the supervisor. If they get any questions, they can be calling to that. when we're revising the forms and all these documents, and I was doing some practice cases, I went back to the 336s. I put some samples together, and I started realizing, we're asking information that we really don't need from individuals and from the colleges, and we should be asking more specifically related to the questions we need. And one of the things I found inconsistent onto there is we asked them for what is the tuition cost. Well, sometimes these programs are 12 credit hours, sometimes 15, sometimes 30. So one of the changes has been is when they put the cost there, how many credit hours are they basing this on? How much of the books and supplies? I don't know what the on-campus double occupancy room is. I don't, if the individual wants to live in the suite because their friends are living there, that's fine. But I want to know what is the occupancy, because that's what we base our cost on, is that on-campus double occupancy room rate. Meals if on campus. Notice I didn't put meals if they're not on campus because we got a different way of calculating that. The parking fee, and honestly, we did come up with a document that shows the parking fees for all those anyway, and I'd like people to start utilizing that document, because when we start doing these calculations, it'll help us get closer to the actual cost than we've been before. And the scholarships, of course, that is when they're merit-based scholarships. And of course, Pell Grants, I may have scratched out work study. We don't use work study on any deduction onto there. And so whether they work at McDonald's or they do a work study in the school, we don't subtract their assistance to us anyway. And it doesn't, my understanding, it doesn't impact their Pell Grant. I'm not sure if it does or not. So do keep in mind, there's always that line item, the family contribution. And, that varied so much. Those amounts that we were getting from the schools on this were shots in the dark. They really weren't always very good calculations how they came up with those amounts. So, and they're typically high. So, and I know they have to do the family contribution. They got a formula. Do keep in mind that when VR funds services, we've heard this at time that the individual's amount of loan will decrease. So if you're being asked by the family to pay the individual first so it doesn't impact their loans, we shouldn't be getting into that, because I've seen some cases where the family is then taking the money in, because it's a low interest loan and it's probably subsidized and stuff like that. But your Pell Grant should not decrease because of ER funding, but sometimes we'll see that the loans will decrease.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
With the room rate, like at SDSU, there's probably 4 different rates just for double occupancy rooms. There's the older dorms, and then there's the newer dorms, and the newer dorms cost twice as much as the older dorms.
Mm-hmm.
How do we look at that?
I think a lot of times when these people have selection of which dorm to go into.
Mm-hmm.
And say, I want to go into the newer dorm, the additional cost is going to be theirs.
Okay.
So. Also, while we're talking about dorms, I know people will say sometimes, well, the college requires them to live on campus the first year or two or stuff like that. And I had someone say that to me, and I called the college, and I said, do you require people to live on require people to live on campus? And she first said yes. And I said, even if they live right in town? Well, not really. So I think we need to be cautious onto that, and there's always exceptions to that, because if a person's 40 years old and has a wife and kids at home, they're not going to make that person live on campus. Mm-hmm. Now, I understand if they're doing a scholarship or something like that, they may have that requirement into there. It probably needs to be looked at different, but just because the college is saying they need to live on campus, I don't think that should be a requirement for us to be funding that. We need to look at that the second residence because of the distance we're commuting.
What about if it's a young person and their family lives in that same town?
Okay.
And are they required to live on campus?
You know what? If they want to live on campus, they can pay the additional amount of money.
Okay.
Required to attend that.
Yeah.
Now, when I was I was talking to North Dakota the other day. Every state does this post-secondary a little bit different to some extent. And they rarely fund, I hope I'm not speaking of terms, Warren, they rarely fund for dorms, the tuition, or they'll fund the tuition fee. Very similar rates what we're doing, but they're not getting into the dorms and the meal plans. So. Okay, the post-secondary allowable rate, a little bit of background. I'll talk about the changes that we've done. It's derived from our fee schedules from the South Dakota State Universities. We pull up those rates every year, and it does help us determine the amount of funding if a client chooses to attend a private or out-of-state college that is available in our state. So, we did make some revisions to help with consistency of the travel, and also when a person's taking less credits, deal a bit more with living in the dorm or off campus, and clarifies the meal when there's kitchen available. And also when you go out to the program guide folder, you will see a 2018 TF Board of Regents document, and that does list all 6 universities and their costs. You'll see some other ones that are more specific to the colleges, but this one here on the Board of Regents pretty well list all of them on there. And so if you also do come across those from one of the technical institutes, send a link to Mitchell and we can put it into a PDF and we can put that out there. That way you're not going off the website all the time, and you can pull it up, and it'll have the parking fee for every one of those colleges. So. Okay, tuition fees, books and supplies, that's a little simpler to calculate. And again, we're looking at if this is South Dakota University or Technical Institute, we're going to pay what the actual cost is, the tuition fees and book supplies, if they're meeting the need and all the requirements. But if they choose other options, or they choose a post-secondary that has a higher cost or private out of state, they, will have to pay the additional cost into there. The computer and computer fees can be included if required. It can be included as a separate, or you can include it as the books and supplies. If tools are required, get the list from the instructor. Just don't send the student down to the most expensive tool shop to get whatever they want. I have seen tools come back in $8,000-$9,000 when they only needed $1,500. So we need to find what's appropriate and necessary onto there. Also, one of the changes is tuition is based on the number of credits, and the average of 30 credit hours is the default number in there. So when you do these calculations, that if they're 12 credit hours, you can put the 12 credit hours in there and it'll calculate that for you. I also want to mention to you that there are times when an out-of-state or disability-specific program may be cheaper, and I'm taking more of an example, Gallaudet, because the interpreting is included in their tuition and fees. So if you do have someone going to Gallaudet, we can approve and allow the higher cost because we're not paying for the interpreting costs that we would normally have in South Dakota. So we look at what would we pay in our state, our college, and of course if it's cheaper to go to Gallaudet because they include that, then we sure can. Other additional costs to the training, there's times, once in a while we may get into a daycare cost. If it's time, it's only for the class times onto there. Just don't be paying for daycare costs for an entire semester for all these kids when the person's taking classes only on Tuesday and Thursdays. So you need to figure it out more specifically if it's needed and appropriate onto there. Living arrangements, that's been changed, how we calculate that. The meals and travel, those calculations all been changed onto there. And of course, SSI payments need to be applied to living and the meal costs. And that's built into the spreadsheet that we have. I'll go through first the living and meal arrangements, the changes we made. First of all, they can be paid when there's a second living arrangement that's due to distance or disability. It's based on 9 months. Additional months can be used if attending full time. One of the changes we made in the spreadsheet is there is one worksheet that says for full year, another one for a semester, and another one says other, I think, where you can put in the actual months. That way, if a person's going in the summer, or if they're going just for 1 month or something like that, you can adjust it and use that one. So, college requirement living on campus does not meet. As I mentioned earlier, the college requirement, they say a person needs to live on campus. Believe me, they would have exceptions to that if we would specifically ask for that. 3551 is the PSAR dorm rate based on double occupancy. The client chooses the more expensive living arrangement. Of course, they're all going to check the newer dorm. I wouldn't, if someone else is paying for it, but they're going to realize that the lowest, one is what we would pay. And 3,913, when in dorm where kitchen is not available and using the cafeteria. What we've done is we're seeing some people that are living off campus and they have their kitchen, and the questions came into how do we calculate that, so we separate that as a separate way of doing that now. So living arrangements off campus. Use the actual 9 months of rent. If the individual signs a 12-month contract, doesn't mean that we're responsible for the next 3 months. Also, the meals are based upon $194 per month, or it's calculated out there for the 9 months when the kitchen's available. Now, what we did do, because if you got a person who is renting with 2 or 3 other people, they could probably, the dorms aren't always the cheapest arrangement. There's sometimes the other cheaper arrangements are more affordable. And if they come up with a more affordable living arrangement, we have allowed what they would save, the difference between their rent and what the actual dorm PSCR amount is, that can be applied towards their meal plan.
So is there a cap on that 9 months of rent?
I'm sorry,
what's reasonable?
Let me back up. There's a difference between the meal plans.
Okay.
And if their rent is more, we can apply the $2,267 difference that is being paid towards the meal plan towards additional rent. So the total living and meals cannot exceed the $7,464.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, Jan, did I?
No, that answers my question.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't know about you guys. When I went to college, there was the Jock House, which I wasn't part of, but 12 people would live in there, each pay $35 a month probably. And so we're wondering, why would we pay the dorm room rate situation? So, transportation costs, living in a dorm or apartment. This is where there's additional residents meeting the maintenance requirement. And so let's say they're living in a dorm, and what we figured is it's going to calculate, we used to have, was it $600? I think it was the PSR amount, and we had some offices just blanketly apply the $600 for transportation, and then other offices were calculating the actual miles. So to get it more consistent, this is what the parking fee is, that ranges significantly between those colleges. And we figured if you're going to live in a dorm, you typically have 5 round trips to college throughout the course of the year. And so this will calculate it at 23 cents a mile. So when we get into the form, you're going to have to do the yes, no's to help this calculation. And from that, it will put in what we will fund for transportation to include that parking fee. If you're commuting from home, which is your primary resident, you're going to have a parking fee. But the travel cost and the miles from the home to school, it does it for the round trip. You need to figure in the number of days of classes. It's not, sometimes these classes are just Tuesday and Thursdays. They don't have maybe don't have classes on Fridays. When you go out to the Board of Regents site, they have the calendar. And I think you just need to get an example from the students' transportation of, if they're going to take like that full course, you can pretty well plan they're going to have classes the 5 days and stuff like that. But if things do change from that, you need to let them know that travel is changing also with it. I'm going to start into, let me bring up one of them here. We did some changes on, Mitchell and I both worked on the funding worksheet. We made a number of changes. First of all, we never found that, we never identified who was filling out the form when the form was being done. So on the bottom, you're going to see the person's name now. You're going to see when the date is being completed. It's also going to have some more detailed questions on answering to help you ask these, to get these calculations. And it's going to get a little more closer to that, to what your actual cost could be, even if it's going to one of the South Dakota schools. So, like I said, the worksheets are for a full year or semester. So like I said earlier, we got one that you can do per month. We separated out the questions for tuition fees, room, board, and transportation. Counselors should refer to fee rate sheets in that program guide, the one I mentioned earlier. And I'm just going to bring up the form here quick. I'm going to bring it up if I find it. And let me make it a little larger. Okay, to help people with this, the green cells is where people would fill out. North Dakota had theirs backwards. They have one similar, and there's the yellow cells to fill out. So the green cells is where you can plug in the information, and so this is going to be Johnny, case 1. The school he's going to, the year would be just 2008, and you need to go down the list. Is this an out-of-state private school chosen due to availability or the disability reason? And you need to, and it does bring up a little helps here. For in-state public technical schools, leave blank. If the school is out-of-state, it does give you some more instructions there. And you need to really select this little, I thought we fixed this. Oh, you know what? I pulled up one on the older one.
Oh, I was like, I think I did fix that.
Yeah, you did. You need to select a yes or a no. Let me see if it's on the other one. I know the other one worked here. Yeah, you fixed it. I pulled up an older one. So you need to go through and select yes or no. And then let's just say for this calculation that we're going to say no. And the number of credit hours based on the calculations are for the full school year. Let's say it's 30. Well, we're doing half a year, so this one here is 15. Second residence due to post-secondary. And let's say no. Is a person living on campus housing? You simply, it's got the yes or no, you do yes. If not living on campus, what is the monthly rent? Well, we just said the person is living on campus, so we're not going to answer that one. If not in the same city, what is the total number of days of classes? Now, the default on this is 76 for fall 2017, and I think it was about the same for the spring, wasn't it? So it's 76 typically. But this person is, I say, living on campus, so it's not a big issue there. We need to say the miles from home to community, and let's say it is, let's say it's only 10. Parking permit, let's say it's 125. So your transportation costs, your actuals, already being plugged into there for you. Now, the actual is when you start getting, and I don't know how close you would say actual, but you could look into up at that Board of Regents site, that extra sheet we had, and get the information on the 15 credit hours, what the cost is. And I'm going to bring that up really quick here for you guys. And it is income rehab. This will be out in your program guides of your faces. Right, program guides we put it. And it'll be I moved them. Where is the M drive deal?
Oh, you're talking about the faces one?
Yeah, I moved them out of here.
Okay, so you have to go to the M drive.
Oh, here, I know where they're at. Here, they're into revised policies. I never put them in there. They're in the program guides for the VR faces. They weren't quite there for. And let me see if I can enlarge this up a little bit for you guys. This is like 5 or 6 pages, and it has a tuition fee for the 6 college universities. Do keep in mind you got to go down to the second page for these other mandatory fees of this credit hour, of computer lease fee or this general activity fee to get that. But your PSAR amount is going to be pretty close into there. So, what I'd like you to do is I sent out a sample, a practice case. I'd like you guys to, we're going to do as a group exercise here. And it's Johnny is the case. And information should have been sent out on him. And I'd like people as each site to go down and do this practice case. And then we're going to reconnect. So we're going to be on mute. And then we're going to talk about what people came up for, how we should fund that. So you can do it as your site and your group kind of discusses it. And then when we connect about 15 minutes, it'd be 3 o'clock, we'll go through discussion on that. Are there any questions so far? Make sure you use the 336 or the financial needs calculation that's on the VR faces, the program guides. That would be the one to use. So I'm going to mute you guys. So I'm going to find mute. And we'll get back on at 3.
Bernie, I have a question.
Yep, go ahead, Bridget.
So I'm trying to look on this post-secondary VR funding worksheet, and I've never done it with the meal plans because now the new 336 form is supposed to have the meal plans in it. Am I supposed to put that in with the room and board costs?
Okay, hold on here. Let me bring up that 336. Were you getting, is just room and board a blanket amount from the college is what you're dealing with?
I've never from any of my colleges ever told me meal plans on there. Yeah, they just told me the room and board.
Yeah, if that was grouped, it was because usually the form we sent to the colleges, it said room and board, which was the meal plan and the dorm situation. They were grouping them together.
Okay, so I take now for like case 1, I'm going to take and put those two together, the room and meal plan, and put them together for the section 12.
They're listed separately. They're listed separately in the practice case.
Yep.
And the room and board, when you do that, it will, when it says actual, you'll add those two together.
Okay.
Okay?
Thanks.
See, Bernie, this is Laura up in Aberdeen. The worksheet, where is the updated one? Because the one that's on forms and faces doesn't have the yes, no, it just has yes.
Hold on here, Watts. Let me go there.
I can go fix it. And
Give Mitchell a couple minutes. I never looked at the one you emailed me. Yeah, I'll print one here. Or, no, I don't want to give you that one. It has the answers on it. I'll print it for you. Hold on. Let me take care of one thing at a time here. Is this muted? Mitchell said he got it fixed on the VR Faces form, so you just need to pull down that copy again.
Oh, we'll probably need more than one.
Yeah, 3 of them.
What's that?
3 cases.
Well, we're gonna do one as a group.
Oh, okay.
I think I gotta read this. Are you guys ready? Aberdeen? You got it all figured out, Mike?
I was lazy. That's all I did.
Yep, I think we're good.
Okay, let me bring it up on the screen, and I'll show you what I came up with, and we'll talk about it. Okay, getting down to tuition fees. Is out-of-state private school chosen due to severe disability? And it was no. Now, this Mitchell and I were talking a little bit about, it says in-state public technical schools leave blank. We're either going to change that or change our formula into there. We're both kind of working on this, and the formulas get kind of complex into there to where I think we can get it to be yes or no, and still allow you for adjustments into there. There's no way you can put every calculation that it's going to get you the majority of the time. This is a situation, but there are situations where you need to figure in some additional circumstances into there. Credit hours is 30. Johnny says second residence due to post-secondary, yes or no? And this was a yes because he is going to Sioux Falls. He's from Sioux Falls High School, and he's going to attend the USD. And I would say he's going to Vermillion to attend it. I know that they do have a community campus situation, or you can get some programs there in Sioux Falls. So I should probably be a little more clear. This is where he has to go down to Vermillion. And so the second residence is required to post-secondary. And he's living on campus, so that is a yes. And again, so every time it does have little yes/no deals. If not living on campus, well, we left it blank. You know, you could probably put something in there and it wouldn't calculate it onto there. And this was a typo. You probably get a different form. If not in the same city, what were the total number of classes? You know, when you go to the Board of Regents, you look at their site, it's 153 is by default. If they're doing both semesters. Miles from school to community is 63, and the parking permit was 159. And again, you can get that parking permit cost from that Board of Regents document, and the parking permit was on the very bottom one, I believe. I thought it was on there. Food service, suites, apartments. Maybe it's on page 4. Vehicle, there it is. So it gets into your vehicle cost up to there. 159 is USD is the far right column there. So let me go back to the spreadsheet again. Practice cases. Okay. So when you put that in, it starts calculating the amounts. The tuition fees is $8,543.70. Now, keep in mind the PSAR amount is the actual, it's the average of those universities. So you may have one of your universities a little bit more into there that you can go in and figure the additional cost and put comments into here. We did put a line called other or adjustment. In case, you know, because what's happening right now is when that tuition fee comes in, you're paying that actual cost for the tuition and fees. So you could go in and look at making that adjustment, adding a few $100s into here, because the actual cost for those 30 credit hours is going to be $8,772. Books and supplies is $1,200. Room and board, it's going to pull at $7,464, and the transportation, it does figure the transportation out exactly, and it does put in there for you the actual into the used amount and everything. So now on this case, I did adjustment of $566.50, and I put a comment in here because the lowest price for the double occupancy and meal plan is really $566 more than our PSAR. Because again, you would figure in what is that actual cost into there of that university, and that one sheet would help you onto there. Also take a look at, it did figure the percent SSI, and that 9 months is also being applied. Now, this may be, I don't know if this is where I got the 566, but you could also figure in a difference between that room and board and what the SSI is into there, but it should be calculated for you. So the total cost for him is $18,078. You got $6,000 Pell Grant, and it subtracts out that SSI there. Now it gets down. I do want to point out that the VR participation and the tuition fees, it does bring it up first to apply for that, and going down the line, you have flexibility in how you want to do those payments onto there, as long as it doesn't come over than the $5,580. And the form you have does do the total calculation there. I had these done, and we've still seen some fixes and stuff like that. So if you were doing this on your spreadsheets, this would have calculated for you here. So you could, I think typically people are putting that towards the tuition and fees. Do keep in mind this does impact some people's income taxes that are getting Pell Grants too. Because let's say that he got $6,000 in Pell Grants for a year, and you get $5,500 in VR. It's going to show on that 1098 they get. It's going to show $11,000 income, and it'll subtract out for tuition and fees only. It doesn't subtract out room and board onto there. Mm-hmm. So I mean, if people ask you about it, they need to deal with their accountant or their tax person onto there, but that's one thing that does happen onto there. So there may be situations that you may want it to apply towards a room and board instead because of that, but that's something between you and the client to discuss it onto there. So, but anyway, you can apply those wherever works appropriate onto there. Yeah, we do room and board. If they do cancel, we do get a refund, but they may apply that. The colleges may apply the Pell Grant refund first. Also, who knows? So now it does have a section here. We did this comments and rationale. Any things or changes, that's where I put that documentation in there. So we did get it all on one page, and that's where you put your documentation. And this really needs to be in the case file. You need to be able to print it. So if you want to save these in a folder on your end drive or something like that, and later go back and edit it if things change, that may be a possibility onto there. Just remember that the calculations are changing from school year to school year. So you can't use the exact same one from last year because the calculations behind it have changed. So, and then you can put your name and the date you completed it. Now, this does have, mine shows case 1, case 2, case 3 because I renamed those. Yours will have a year, semester, and other options. So you can pick, if the other is, I was helping someone in Rapid City this last week, and the kid was going to summer school. So there's 3 months. So this allows you to put in the number of months to base calculations on. So, and then that would adjust those other calculations in there.
Oh, I see.
See that? Mm-hmm. And the other one is a semester where sometimes you're doing the calculations on a semester at a time. Now, do keep in mind, if you get the information for a year, you can do a full year. You can do, in the plan though, you can do one semester, split it in half and do one semester if that way you want to do it. So it does give you that options onto there. It depends on how you're getting the information from the school, where a person may start in January, so it is one semester. So, and if there's any changes you guys see on that or tips or help, let Mitchell and I know. We'll make those changes and we'll get them back out there into the forms directory under VR Faces. Just keep in mind that sometimes we do make one change, it does break a link or cause a problem. It's on something else, like that yes or no drop down that we kind of run into there and stuff. So, and then we'll kind of keep plugging in the revised date that, so you always know the most current one be that date on there.
So what would happen if you figured this for 9 months and then halfway through the school year the situation changes and you have to, for example, he needs to do the single dorm because of accessibility. He has to move to a different dorm. How would you adjust this, or would you?
You could. We've had situations where halfway through the year the person has to live in a dorm because driving home 20 miles was too physically. He needed to lay down or something like that, or need to have for disability purposes. If they're looking at everything, all the costs are starting from next semester, so you can recalculate the one semester if you wanted to.
Okay.
Or go back and edit it for a full year. But yeah, it depends on how they're going to look at it. If it's a full year or just a one semester situation. So, I mean, you've got it in a plan, and I think as long as I don't think you need to redo the plan unless there's some significant changes. But if there would be a new dorm cost, you probably would need to do a new plan or amended one into there. And continue from there on. And basically,
so you could amend this as long as you have a hard copy or another file of the original somewhere.
Yeah. And then put in your note why you revised it.
Okay.
So. Okay. But anytime you're funding college, you really should have these worksheets in there. And again, we try to get on one page where you put your comments and you justify it, because when we look at when we're paying the bills for this, we look at this 336 calculation form. So. In other ones, it's pretty simple that if there is no second living expenses, person meets financial need, there's no Pell Grant, we're covering the room and boards, we're covering the tuition and fees, the bill comes in, you can process and pay it and things like that. But this will get you much closer to the actual cost than we may have had in the past.
So this will be electronic in the case file then?
Not yet in the VR basis. It's in the forms.
Okay.
So whether we put it in the VR faces actual in the future, we've got our priority right now is all the R911 revisions we've got to get done first. Questions? You guys want to do it? Yeah.
Bernie? Oh, quick question here in Sioux Falls. When we did it, you see how you adjusted the room and board by the 566.50? And in that new adjustment line? Go back to the...
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So you added the 566.50 and made the comment in the rationale box. How about for tuition and fees? It was 8,772 minus the 853.4370. Wouldn't that be an additional $228.30?
Yeah, it could be.
Okay, that's what we just. Yeah, and so okay, that's it. Thanks.
Now it's their actual cost, and now if they end up taking 16 credit hours, you could adjust this up here to 32 credit hours. But I would say most of the time they're 15 credit hours a semester. One of the problems we have with the PSER in the past is when people went out of state, we were based on 16 credit hours a semester and they take 12. And within our PSER should decrease because of that. And so that's why we moved it to a credit hour. Now this is a state university. You could look up the actual rate was 8,772. Yeah, and you could have looked at that difference and you could have put that adjustment amount into there. Also, the adjustment amount you could include in there is a computer fee that was not included into there. So this could get you pretty close to what the actual costs are going to be. A little bit more accurate there.
Bernie, this is Jennifer in Yankton. We just left that number 2 blank, and then that allowed us to pull in the actuals.
Yeah, and Mitchell and I were talking about that, and I think we're going to get rid of that. It does pull in the actual amount, but that is saying whether if you're going to an out-of-state or private. I would rather to where we do the yes or no specifically, and there's just times that the state university's actual cost could be a little higher.
One of the recommendations that we were saying is, could you do a Y, an N, or an NA there? Because then we could choose NA there for the state public schools. And then it would still bring in the actuals for us. And then it would show that you didn't skip it. It's just that it doesn't apply.
Yeah, let me see what's on it. The programming is, I mean, for appearance-wise, we could put yes, no, NA. And all the formulas are based itself off of yes or no's. So it would at least look like you answered it. Because, yeah, we got the other ones here where, if not living in campus, the one above it is saying you're living at campus, it could default put NA on there for you. But, so those are some options that we had to make a number of changes and a number of changes in the formulas. So if there are some other ones, we can try them and put them out there. It's kind of a work in progress on this. And the one you're looking at is really an older version even than the one that Mitchell had posted on the site. You guys want to do another one? Good time.
Bernie, this is Laura up in Aberdeen. Just a clarifying question. Are we looking at starting this come the fall semester?
Yes.
Or what is the guidance on that?
Starting fall semester.
Okay, thank you.
And I know that the forms from the colleges are going to have some of the older information questions, but again, I think that one sheet does help that to get the costs. So, well, let's do another practice case, Kelsey. And then what I'm going to do is we'll give about 15 minutes, so it'll be about 3:35, and we'll go through discussion. We probably won't get through the last case, Amy, but that's something that supervisors you can do out in the field. And then I came up with an answer. I'll send it to you guys, and you may have, a little different on there. As long as you have good justification how you came up with the cost, and hopefully this will be more consistent across the state onto there. So let's take about 15 minutes and let's do Kelsey's case. How you guys doing? You ready? Aberdeen's frozen in space. So how are you guys ready? Continue on.
Yeah, we're okay. Yep.
Okay, let me adjust this. Okay, let me bring this up. This is case number 2, Kelsey, and graduated from Watertown, and wants to go to Augustana to be a sign language interpreter. That's a unique program there, only in Augustana. So let me bring up the screen here. Now we noticed a calculation error on the travel that it didn't do. The other one I thought it did do it correctly.
The transportation?
Or transportation.
Yeah, I fixed it.
You did?
That's
and
right.
sent it out again.
Okay. So anyway, question number 2 there is this an out-of-state or private school chosen for availability or disability reasons, yes or no? And this was yes, because Augustana is the only place that has that interpreting program. Credit hours is going to be 30 per semester. Is the second residence due to post-secondary is yes. The person is living on campus. So we left the next one blank, not living on campus. Transportation in not the same city was the total number of classes. I left that blank just for this calculation because they do have the second residence, and there's 108 miles in it. For some reason, my worksheet, it should be calculating correctly, and your guys out there, it should take the 108 times 23 cents a mile times 5 round trips, and it'll add to 175. It'll probably come up with 300 something, maybe, I don't know.
It came up to 423.40.
Okay, so it will calculate that into there and put that into transportation. So going down a little further, the actual tuition fees is $14,250, if I calculate correctly, and that's what it's in using because at high rate it's because at private school it's going there. And then books and supplies was $1,000 I had written in there.
Yes.
Okay, and it brought even though the PSDR is $1,200, $1,000 is what it brought in a lower rate. Room and board. Now, he chose to go in a single occupancy room versus as his preference, not because of a disability reason. And again, that's one of the things that we don't, you can ask 20, 30 more questions and narrow everything down. But what I did in this situation is I put a note below that the single occupancy room is $1,531 higher than the PSAR, and I'm showing that adjustment on that other amount.
I got 1958 higher.
You got 1958?
Yeah. You take the 94, 22.
I did too.
Maybe my calculation is what,
1958.
58. Okay. First of all, I got to put a minus in front of it.
Between the 9422 and the 7460.
Yeah. You know, I may have taken it between their lowest double occupancy room.
And then you would add the student activity fee in that, wouldn't you?
You could add that in there. Now, we had a discussion here about the student activity fee, if that should be, if VR should be paying it or not. I'll ask North Dakota. Luann, are you there? Does North Dakota pay the student activity fee?
We look at tuition and fees. I don't think we've ever broken that out. Have we?
Correct. If even if it is broken out, a lot of times they'll pay that activity fee.
Okay. I think our consensus was here it's required we pay it. So that's where the student activity fee could be included into there. And of course the transportation would be a little higher on the newer revised form calculating. Person doesn't have SSI. Person has Pell Grant, $6,000. Now this other comparable benefits of $13,000. This is you know, when we were having a discussion, 13,000 seemed like a lot, but you go out to the Augustana website, it's 13,000 annually, and so it would be subtracting that off of there, and so our contribution would be much less onto there. So again, that would be about somewhere around the $4,000 range paying for towards the tuition fees.
Hey, Bernie, this is Luann.
Yeah.
How can you use that 13,000 when it's based on her academic achievement, on her merit?
It's not. We define merit-based is when they apply for it, when they're competing for it, and the other indicator is if it's only specific to that college. They're simply tuition reductions. It's right on their website. If you have this GPA, your tuition fees is, it's being reduced. So it's not a merit base that you earn where you apply for.
Oh, that's not what we understood RSA to tell us.
Well, that's what Bernie understands.
Although, somebody
I'll send you our program guide onto that. And that's what we were seeing was these private colleges, their rates are much, much higher. And, they're simply tuition reductions. But also, I looked at your guys' spreadsheet, Luann, and you guys apply that PSR rate across the board, irregardless of what the private rate is. I don't know if I'm correct on that or not.
No, if up on top you say private school chosen due to disability reasons, then you put it right.
Okay.
So we'll have, but it's the same thing. We have a private college that's very expensive, so they get these huge, for example, volleyball scholarships. Would you apply that?
There is conditions that they have to apply for it. And I'll send you a copy of the program guide onto there.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, that would be great to see. Now, just because somebody's going to get a $13,000 volleyball scholarship, the counselor would be visiting with that person to see if how they're going to use it.
Because we would have actually, in the case of the volleyball scholarship, we would have actually overfunded them if we would have paid them based on this higher ed worksheet.
Yeah.
So conversations do go on.
Yeah, and these are, I think, where we talk about there's a competitive process where you are applying for it, and but Augustana, there's just no application process. If your GPA is this, your tuition is reduced this amount.
Okay.
So I'll send you that program guide.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hello, Bernie.
Hey, Steve.
Hello, Steve. In the past, and I did it here, for that 13,000 scholarship that wasn't transferable, I just took it off the tuition at the top, and then I put a note in that comment box that said, non-transferable scholarship, reduced tuition, whatever, and it came out just fine. Is that okay if I continue doing that?
Yeah, you can do it a couple different ways on some things. You can, subtract it right out of the actual right off the bat, or you can show it in here, the line item, stuff like that. Now, granted, scholarships that the American Legion is giving where people compete and you have to do an essay maybe or something like that, and you're competing on it, that would be a typical scholarship that we're used to. But yeah, there are so many other ones that they're just tuition reductions.
Yeah, pretty obvious.
Yeah.
Well, in this scenario, if we say we're going to pay $3,889 for tuition and fees, that's more than the tuition and fee amount.
Well, when they give them that $13,000 comparable benefit, that's they're staying in a dorm, their meal plan, there's all those other costs.
The whole thing, not just tuition. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So is there a reason you used the full room and board on the used side and then noted the adjustment, or wouldn't you just?
Because the way it is, it calculates and it uses that actual amount. Now, if this person had to have a single room because of disability,
Oh, so you can't adjust the used rate.
no, you can't. Anything in yellow you can type all day long, and unless you get the password, which I won't tell you, but it adds to 12.
No, I was wondering why your math was different than mine.
Yeah, mine is.
And it's just more or less so you don't overwrite formulas accidentally and things like that. And again, it's hard to predict 1,001 scenarios, but there are people that are going to need, they're in a wheelchair, they're going to need the single room, so you're either going to have to let it calculate the actual cost here, or you're going to have to put it in adjustment there. So.
Bernie, this is Aberdeen. Can you re-explain where you came up with the 1958, or that exact number anyway?
The negative 1958.
Yeah, and Jessica calculated a little different than I did. I put, if you looked at what the PSAR amount is and what the actual cost difference, the PSAR is $7,464, and the person wanted to live in a single room, single occupancy room, just for preference. So we could have done a couple of different things there. We could have put in the double occupancy room and just let it calculate. I put in what the actual single occupancy rate is, and I showed the minus 1958. That's where it's coming from. And it may be best just to simply put in that double, look at what their rate is on their website, the double occupancy, and put that in as actual, and disregard their choice of living in the suite or if it doesn't have a disability reason. But whatever you do, kind of put the documentation to the side there. And consensus was here, even though I said student activity fees not included, it probably should be included in your costs.
Bernie, this is Jennifer in Yankton.
Yep.
Under the transportation, it only pulled in your $175 for the parking fee. Do we have to put in the number of classes in order for it to come in?
No, Mitchell revised it, and it's out there again now, the corrected one. She had to go back out into program guides or forms of the VR faces and pull it in, and the calculation is correct.
Okay, and then the other question, and I know, like you said, there's multiple ways to count it, but we can put the activity fee under the other things, right? That student activity fee under other or adjustment?
Yeah.
Thank you.
You may have computer fees there. You may have when you look at some of those, there may be some other costs associated they may have during the course of the year that is actually needed and stuff like that. Now, keep in mind, interpreting cost, if you have anyone who needs a lot of interpreting, you should be discussing with Janet. And we get down to the point of figuring which days they are, how many classes do they have in a row, are one interpreter needed, two interpreters needed, are they doing traveling? And so we worked out actual spreadsheets that for the entire year. And so if you get into those, we work with Janet Ball onto those. Same thing with personal tenant services situations. We do have some students go to Marshall, Minnesota sometimes because that college is much, much more accessible for people that are in wheelchair and they have personal tenants there overnight and stuff. So, other questions? I'll send out the case number 3 of the supervisors, and that way, if you guys want to do that as a practice case sometime, feel free to do it. And keep in mind, all these cases, I didn't even get into, we're assuming these people meet financial need. So we're not even getting into the financial needs discussion onto there, but just assuming that these people met the financial need criteria and stuff. So. And again, if there's any recommendations, changes on them, let Mitchell and me know. We'll make them changes, and we get the form revised one out there right away. That's it. I don't know about you guys' room, but ours has got to be like 95 degrees, and it's like cooking in here.
Hey, Bernie, this is Laura.
I just
Abernathy.
knew Laura, I knew you were going to ask a question.
Hey, it's not
Okay,
even
go
like
ahead,
a
Laura.
backtracking question, so be nice. So I'm looking at the program guide, that document that you emailed out, and on the third page up at the top, it's saying the client is responsible to provide documentation of the rent agreement and a copy of the past utilities. And I'm reflecting back on the conversation from that supervisors meeting. Are we then looking at getting the utilities copy and just averaging that for 12 months? Or I know we talked about like $100 plus the rent. Just flat.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have electricity if that's not included in the rent or the heat situation. So, yeah, you could get an average of the last 3 months' utilities if you wanted to. Electricity would be the most common one. And then keep in mind, you got to split that cost if there's other roommates involved. Because honestly,
Okay,
you could
so
you could live off campus, I think, if you had another roommate, probably just as cheap, if not cheaper, than you could in a dorm. I think those dorms are kind of a racket for those little 8x10 rooms they have, and what they charge in the meal plan, where you could be much. So, yeah, I'm fine with come up with could be electricity. I don't know about cable TV, definitely not. I think internet, I don't think so either. I think the electricity, gas, actual basics they need. They probably may go over the PSCR rate, then I don't know, but that'll be what we'll go up to. And keep in mind, when we did this rate for this meals when you got a kitchen, that's also applying for other programs, like if you have a client going to the Brain Injury Center in Rapid City, or probably even the Rehab Center, maybe, that we should be following that rate when they have a kitchen there.
Did we lose them?
Anyone there? There's sometimes a connection. Anyone there?
What? Hello?
We're here.
Okay, we're there.
We're here.
The screen went blank. We're kind of wondering why.
Bernie,
Any
this
other
is Warren.
questions?
Bernie, this is Warren. I think this is a quick question.
Okay.
On the PowerPoint, you can contribute for a it says computer if it's required. And do you ask for documentation from the school saying this computer is required? Because pretty much, I'm thinking all of our students going to college need a laptop or tablet or something.
The colleges are saying on their course cost list there which ones are required. You get into like Mitchell Tech, that the programs in the computer science field or satellite communication, they're saying right on there the computer required in a specific one that they want, that it and there's typically a computer fee maybe involved.
Yep, I can see that.
Southeast Tech.
We do that too, but if it's just a regular someone's going to school to be whatever, you pretty much need a computer nowadays. And then do you allow for that, even if it's not on their website?
Only if there's disability reasons. They have a vision or learning disability, would we allow that? We pay for that.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, guys? Okay, well, we're done. And again, we'll try and get the recording out there for you. And have a good rest of the week. You bet. Put your site on mute.
Your call will be disconnected.